Grow your practice, grow your wealth, grow your impact. Find out how to spend less time in the dental chair and more time on the things you love.
Welcome back to the Dental Wealth Podcast. With me in the studio, as always, is the man himself. I went with something original today. The man himself, Mr. Eric J. Morin.
You know, it's funny how many people said that they laugh at that. You know, we just have to have like a list of adjectives. Good morning in the ATL. So it's a great day. Did a full workup at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. Just let all the people know I'm healthy as can be. It's what happens when you cut out everything good in life.
They're like, sir, what do you do? And yet they still told you not to eat like this laundry list of things. You're like, what can I eat? Like, is there anything I can?
I mean, I already eat like hardly any meat. I eat, basically, I don't know. I've cut out
like
anything.
Whole. It can't be whole grain. That's up to 32 grains.
Oh yeah, they sent me the book. And it was like no soy, no wheat, no. I was like, what do you? All you left me I got lima beans and broccoli. That's all I can eat. That's what I got.
Like this diet's clearly not for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, but I will tell you this: you get zero, plaque buildup in your arteries if you just cut all the good stuff out.
You don't say. Eat grass all day. You're gonna look good.
I heard Elon Musk talking this morning about AI's impact on longevity and Neuralink and all that stuff. So I'm just telling you, an extra 10 years might buy me an extra 30 years. So, who knows?
Yep. Then soon enough, you'll put a chip in your brain and you'll be 130 years old. Running around, feeling good. No big
And then
deal.
I jump on my motorcycle. So,
it's like, how are they going to get rid of like the old age aspect to it? Not the mental aspect, because they're figuring that out. It's like, how do you make skin not old? Like Elon's next challenge.
There'll be some kind of electronic thing button you can hit in the morning time. It just like
right,
and it makes your skin super tight.
Yeah, like you go into this tank and you press a button. It's like you come out like fresh, young.
You look like you're 25.
You put
Incredible.
25. You type in the age you want to look. 25. It's like the Jetsons. It's like
what are they? I'm waiting till they can download my consciousness into the super cyborg robot.
There's actually a show on Amazon called Upload where they talk about that, where you can, like, when you're about to die, you can upload your consciousness to this virtual world, and you have somebody that like helps you through the virtual world. It's a neat concept what they're coming out. I guess you have to come out with original stuff now. Everybody's done it. I think I think Ed Sheeran just dealt with that with the Marvin Gaye lawsuit. He went on Howard Stern and he was like, okay, so look, this is basically what the lawsuit was, and he played 5 songs with the same chords. He was like, these are the songs. He's like, if you tell me that I can't play like this chord, then there's literally thousands of songs that have copyrighted this. And that he went in front of a jury and did that, and he won the case just by doing that. It was neat to watch. I know you like playing guitar and ukulele and stuff, so you should watch that interview with Howard Stern. You'll be like, oh, this is true. This is true.
He holds a great interview for sure.
Speaking of Elon Musk, sir, I saw today that he, before shareholder meeting, he said that he sent a memo out to everyone on his team that he must personally approve of all future hires in the organization. So that kind of leads me to the topic of conversation today, which is just kind of the recruitment process and finding top talent within an organization. Because I would say our recruitment process is pretty robust. It's pretty process oriented. There's a lot of steps to get on the Tower team. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on, the importance of that, especially in a dental practice.
I just started having a conversation with a group that was looking at some de novo startups, and I was talking about the failure of the hiring process. And, when we get down to it, it's interesting. My biggest argument's always been everyone copies everyone and does it the exact same way, the same failed approach that's been used forever. And it was fine when it was one location and it was, Betty up front and Susie, and it was small town. But it's such an antiquated model. And, I was even talking about the hiring and training process before I even, if I was a startup, de novo type startup business, that I would start with my training process before I even opened the door, because I was talking about the failure. What we do is there's a lot of positions, and we'll talk about that during this podcast, but there's a lot of positions, but let me just talk about what do we call that, the low-hanging fruit. We have one of the highest grossing positions as far as the contribution to the overall practice. Because if you look at the revenue cycle, the way it goes is, you put money in marketing, and then that marketing ultimately leads to a phone call, and then there's the conversion of the phone call to the appointment, and then you got to get the person to show up, and then ultimately then it goes into case acceptance, and then from case acceptance it goes into billing and collections, right? So that's your revenue cycle in a dental practice. And so when you start thinking about the breakdown in that process, most of the process is reactive by nature. It's we hired Susie up front because she was the first person to walk in the door. We pay her the least of anybody. She has zero training outside of Becky, who spent a few minutes with her teaching her dentrix. And we put her on the phone when she's not qualified to do. We've talked about the 4 levels of competency before on this show, which is, talking about how we move through each level of competency. And I'll talk about this for 1 second for a moment, just since I brought the topic up. We have unconscious incompetency, which I didn't know what I didn't know. By the way, I'm going to tell you the story. I was thinking about this, by the way, watching my son shaving. So unconscious incompetency, I didn't know what I didn't know. And then ultimately speaking, you know what you don't know, which is conscious incompetency. And then you get to conscious competency, which you can do it, but you got to think through it. And then eventually unconscious competency, right? And I was watching my son shave the other day, which was the most painful thing to watch. Like I was, right? He first of all didn't know how to shave, right? He didn't know what to do. And then I taught him, well, I thought I had taught him, Matthew, how to shave. But watching him shave in this idea of, he understands it. So we'll kind of I'll give him a little credit to this conscious competency, but I'm not even going to, I don't know. He's like between, right? Like he's between knowing how to do it and not knowing how to do it. But watching someone take a razor to their face and just jab at their face with a razor, you're like, I feel like I'm failing as a parent or something.
Start freaking out.
Like slow down, like, trying to teach them. And so it's interesting because what happens as an adult is we've been doing it for so long, every single day. We don't ever think about the strokes we make. We don't ever think about the way we shave. I watched him take shaving cream, and I just put a little squirt on the, the ends of my fingertips, and then that covers my beard. He must have put an ounce of shaving cream in his hand and then just somehow rubbed it all over his hands, and it ended up everywhere but what should have been his face. And then he had a quarter coverage. I'm like, what the hell just happened with this shaving cream? So it's it's a complete disaster. It's just watching him learn how to shave. But it's interesting. We have someone who's responsible for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars worth of revenue. And yet, their training is so inadequate, but even case acceptance training is adequate. When people do case acceptance, if we look at a practice and we look at the breakdown, and we'll talk about this, and this is going to lean into how we find the right people, but when we think about that revenue cycle, phones, first of all, marketing. Most people don't understand the marketing. They don't understand acquisition costs. They don't understand the breakdown of that. They don't understand how to get it back. All those types of things in cash conversion cycle. And then we get into phones. They hire people who are unqualified to pick up the phone. They do no kind of testing for this person. It's the least qualified, least educated person on the team that contributes to the most income outside the doctor. Then we take this person, we give them little to no training. If we do give them training, it's typically reactive because someone sold us some kind of phone training or something, so it's reactive. And then we get into, then the person doesn't show up anyhow, so we don't have a really strong cancellation policy because we haven't taught people how to overcome that, because the only way they can literally learn is to get an unconscious competency, to the point where they don't have to think about getting over objections anymore. But that takes so much role play and training. Most offices never spend the time doing that. And then when it gets to finding a case conversion, because they're doctors, we don't put them through the true. I ask a doctor every single time, Matthew, I say, what's your case conversion? 100%.
Don't know.
It's just almost comical. It's how many? Tell me about your phones. Oh, we convert 100% to appointments. I'm like, you don't even. Do you even understand the national average? It's just, first of all, it's just a ridiculous comment. It shows that you don't know your numbers, and doctors are often, believe it or not, left off the hook of case conversion because They don't want to feel like they're selling people, right? So it's so that's usually left off the hook. That's an excuse to say I don't really want to actually learn how to convert cases and take care of patients, because that's actually what it is. And then we get into the collections or billing, and usually it's some part of that cycle that breaks down. So if that's responsible for millions of dollars, then we would ultimately want to be proactive. And I was talking about the proactive cycle that I would use as an investor. If I was creating a de novo type startup, how I would start from the very beginning and change the entire process. Because I was talking to a very intelligent, successful doctor recently, and we were talking about, we both agreed, like, the GP process is completely broken. It is a reactive, broken process that relies on PPO insurance most of the time, that just is not, it's not adequate. But yet people still do the exact same thing over and over and over and over and over. And even though we know it's not adequate, we react to, whatever. It's almost like it's like the boat. Where, remember the old cartoons where, like, you'd have like where like it would be Goofy or something would put a finger in like the hole, and then like another hole would open up and they put their finger in, and then it's like a toe and they put the big toe in, and then before you know it, they're stretched out trying to hold this thing together. I feel like that's like the traditional GP model, and it's like Vegas Vacation when he's in the dam and he's putting gum everywhere. That's right. It just like, keeps popping out. It's just like, I think it's so funny that you say that. I think, there's two things. So you made a great comment about Grant ultimately shaving. So the funny part is, it's just like a dental practice. You taught him how to shave and you assumed he was doing it correctly until you went and watched him do it. Would you have known that he was just jacking his face up? Same thing with dental practice. Just because you tell this person, here's your script, let me hear you role play just for one day, you can't assume that person's just going to grasp it right away. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot more training, a lot more observation to make sure they're doing it correctly. So the Grant story is a perfect story. Oh my God. By the way, he was bleeding. He had like blood coming down, and I was like, well, no, duh. Like, you just gouged at your face with 4 razor blades. I mean, what did you? And he keeps it. He thinks he's doing it right, and he continues to just make himself bleed. Same thing with a dental practice. Matthew, I said to him, you want my help? Like, I had to stop the bleeding, right? And he was like, no, I got it. I was like, no, you don't. I'm not quite sure that you do. Have to, but it is a good analogy because so many practices are bleeding and there's cuts all over the place. But let's roll this into, what I want to do is roll this into selection. Like, let's roll that into a selection conversation because, I believe that there could be but this podcast, I'm not going to talk about the entire, how I would redesign a GP office, but because I would, by the way. Yeah. But let's talk about the situation where we go to hiring. One of the things we started doing recently, and I'll kind of go into an explanation a little bit. And so I've went through some EAs and they haven't worked out. And one of my concerns was, do we have, and by the way, I don't know what what those people were as far as we never tested them, but I was saying really what I want in this person is I want a critical thinker. I'm a nice person, but I have high expectations of people. So what I was like, my demands require someone to be a critical thinker. So in that sense, then we do Colby, which Colby is really important, especially for an EA. And if you're not using Colby or something similar, DISC is completely different than Colby. And I'm fine with DISC too, but just understand DISC profile is just telling somebody like how they're wired from a personality standpoint. That's not Colby. Colby tells you how this person ultimately handles themselves under stress. Like, do they need a lot of facts? Do they ultimately need to use their hands? Do they are they quick to action? Are they somebody who creates process, or are they someone who delegates and pressure? And so it tells you how someone's naturally wired, so that for certain positions you would want a person wired certain ways. For instance, I've never seen a doctor on a scale of 1 to 10 be a true fact finder. Yeah. Why? Because they need to have a lot of facts before they start actually making a clinical decision. So we see that, certain positions require certain Colbys, and that depends on, there's analysis. We started putting in the Wonderlic test too. which measures aptitude. It does a national average, and it measures aptitude. It measures their motivation towards the position and how motivated they are to actually do this job, and then their ultimately their personality and how their personality fits it. And
it's based on the position. Like you could do the test based on the exact position.
The exact position. And we're spending so much more time in the hiring process because there's got to be a training process too, by the way. There's got to be an onboarding process. There's got to be a training process. There's got to be, how do we get this person up to speed? So there's another component to this. If I hire people that are really talented, but I don't set them up for success, that's a failure already in my chain. But when I look at the person and I'm trying to get them up to, first of all, is this person qualified? So for me, I need somebody who has a certain Colby, but I also need someone to have a certain Wonderlic, ultimately, because I need to know, do they have critical thinking skills? Do they, like, when I have someone who's low motivation for a job, they might be able to do the job well, and they might be a critical thinker, but they don't really want to do the job. So there's a lot to actually test and make sure that you have the right people. And the critical positions, doctors aren't spending time in critical position hiring. Agreed?
Yeah. I mean, I think most dental practices, like, to touch on a little thing that you said earlier, is, when they buy a practice, they're handed kind of a playbook that's been in place for that practice. Most of the time when you're buying that practice, I would say that practice, in my opinion, this might be the opinion of most, it was probably not a super successful practice, because the ones that were super, super successful got probably, if they're selling it, probably got bought by PE. So you're buying probably, let's call it even at the best, a $1.2 million practice. If you're coming out of school and you're buying a practice, that practice has probably been 1.2 for a while. So they don't have the hiring processes. They don't have any of that in place. The dentist was like, here you go. And you're like, okay, so where do I start? And then, like you said at the beginning, was you just kind of feel the need. Like, okay, I need someone up front. Is this person staying or going? Okay, they're going. So I just need to fill it because somebody's got to answer the phones. And you don't spend time training them. It's just, okay, we really like them. And I've had that conversation before. It's like, how do you hire people? Oh, we take them they come into the office. We really like them. They get along with the girls or the guys, and and then we get them started. And there's nothing else considered with it.
If you take this conversation seriously and you think about this for a moment, which is there is extreme low correlation between someone interviewing well and success on the job. We tend to hire people we like that are similar to us, and that's what has always happened. And we tend to hire people that are more attractive. We tend to hire people that are, fill in the blank. But that has little to nothing to do with job performance. And so what ends up happening is they're likable, but maybe they didn't work out. And, and then all of a sudden they become not likable really quick. Yeah. And so, how much does likability? Because if we have to say, then when we say that somebody's performance is not then on personality, because it's not, by the way. Now, having somebody up front, this is where a disc would come in, by the way, where you'd want somebody who maybe is a high I, which is more of a feely person, more emotional, more more into morale, those types of things. Like depending on the position, in operations, you might want a heavy driver, a high D. And so depending on the position, this is where a disc would come in. And you'd say, I want a certain type of personality, just so kind of make that clear, is that we're talking about, I mentioned 3 different tests, which is DISC, Colby, and Wonderlic, and they're 3 different tests for 3 different reasons. They're not the same tests that just cover a little something differently. They're literally covering completely different things. Yeah. Especially if you go into aptitude, personality, and then cognitive skills, and they're just different. And so we have to realize that when we are looking at positions, because turnover is so expensive inside organizations, we did an analysis. It was a month or so ago. We did this analysis of if I had a doctor come in and I turned over a doctor every 3 years over a 15-year period, versus if I was to keep a doctor and keep them consistently. I don't have the math right in front of me, but I want to say it was like the difference of like $2 to $4 million. Man,
it was a lot.
But it was a lot. It was a big difference in that turnover and getting that person up to speed. And we assumed in our math that this person got, was increasing more and more. They got up to speed more and more, and then we lost them, and then they did it again, and we did it again, and we did it again, versus someone who stayed on turn. Because one of the things we teach at Tower now, and we're really pushing it hard, is especially with we started with our more advanced group, which is really talking through how to build a model where people have an ascension within inside the organization, how to create ascension models within inside the organization, which is not in dentistry, by the way. It's in many major industries, but it's not in dentistry. And we've kind of started to really pioneer that within the dental world. And when we talk about ascension, when we talk about selection, when we talk about training, when we talk about these types of things, these are how you build a world-class organization. But it takes time and it takes effort. And, right now might be a good time because a lot of people are holding back on major products. I was just talking to a banker this morning. It was like, we're kind of this interesting time economically because interest rates are high, but prices are still high. Yeah. So, housing market hasn't come down. Cars haven't come down, buildings haven't come down. So we're kind of in this weird, unique space right now. And so a lot of dental offices are just put everything on the brakes, right? Yeah. And just say, we're not going to expand right now. We're not going to buy another building right now. We're going to kind of put on the brakes and see what's going to happen economically. Well, this might be a good time to then go internally and start looking inside your organization and saying, okay, if we're going to pump the brakes a little bit on growth, I say growth, I don't mean maybe efficiency of your chairs and things like that. I'm really talking about buying another location or another building or those types of things.
Yeah.
So if we get there, then it's like, okay, well, then we need to talk about how do we then use this time to increase our unconscious competency, our hiring process, our ascension models, our HR, our everything. How do we get really good now so that we're ready to explode and we get the right team in place right now in position for a future expansion?
Yeah. I think it's ultimately becoming heavily involved with your operations director, your COO, your operations manager. I know you and I talked to Rachel, who's, for those of you who don't know, she's our CEO or COO. She's great at what she does, and we lean into her a lot. And I meet with her probably 4 times a week. You meet with her a bunch of times a week, and we meet just solely on operations sometimes. Like, okay, so operationally, what could we do differently? How could we become better as an operation? Because I'm looking at it as a business, and we see it really click when practices stop referring to their business as a dental practice and they start really thinking, okay, this is a business. So if I was a business owner, what would I do in this situation? And then they start making different moves. They say, okay, well, I need to figure out my onboarding process. How do I hire these people? If it's this level, if it's front desk, these are the profile. We're going to use Disc and Colby. If they're management level, we're going to use Wonderlic and Colby. If they're C-suite level, we're going to use just Wonderlic. Like, having these things built out will allow you to scale faster. I think everybody kind of just wants that magic pill that makes them grow immediately. Well, what happens if you were to bring on 100 new patients tomorrow? Could you handle the infrastructure? If you went from 1.5 to 3.5 in 12 months, how would you be able to handle that? Most of the time, the reason why organizations can't do that is from an operational standpoint. They can't hire the people because they don't have the process in place. They don't know what the numbers look like. Everything's kind of a mess. And the ones that are super successful figure out operationally how to do this. And hiring is the biggest component of it. We see it in dentistry all the time. It's very need and reactive based instead of really future forecasting and saying, okay, in the next 6 months, I need to hire XYZ. In the next 2 years, I need to hire XYZ. And you and I talk about this all the time because I am going under the assumption that we're going to grow. We're putting the pieces in place that we are going to grow the organization. It's not, I don't know if we can bring that person on in 6 months. It's, yes, we will bring on these people in 6 months. We will bring these people on in 12 months because the growth will sustain. And these people coming in, it's not only when you have a robust hiring process, it's when they come in the door, the expectations are set. Like, this is your scorecard. This is what your 90 days looks like. This is everything you need to get accomplished. And then you can directly correlate that to the increase in revenue in your company. And that brings confidence. If you lack confidence, you're not going to hire the people you need to. You're not going to take that. Sometimes it's just you need someone. And one of the things I always push the advisors to do is like, it's okay. You can be a little forceful with clients sometimes, but you need to hire this person. Like number wise, and I know you did recently for a business, you did calculations on, they really wanted to hire somebody. And we were like, okay, let's break this out with some math. It was like, okay, well, it doesn't really make sense to hire this person right now. So that's just one component of the hiring process. One small component that made all the difference. Yeah, they probably liked him. They probably thought he was going to be great. He could have scored great on a Colby, could have scored great on the Wonderlic. But if that one component didn't fit, you don't make the hire. And I think it's not just all right, let's hire this person in 2 weeks. You have to do some like the money in recruitment and training and hiring people is astronomical. Like companies spend millions of dollars on it. And for them to hire somebody and then find out they weren't the right fit and then they lose them, that costs them millions of dollars. So you have to start thinking of that way is, okay, when I bring this person on, how do I make sure they're like, how can I go to sleep at night feeling I did everything I possibly could to make sure this person was going to be the right fit for the organization. Yeah. And if you do that, you're going to have confidence in your hiring. That's the only way.
And you have to slow down. You have to slow down and go through strain, be willing to go through strain to find the right person. But, this goes back to one of the comments we've had on this show before, which is, well, then you'd have to be in a form of selection, which means you don't wait until, like, first of all, we know when someone's underperforming. Like, can we all just acknowledge we know when someone's underperforming? Like, yeah. And here's the crazy part. People know they're underperforming. Like nobody gets surprised. It's very rare that somebody gets surprised when they're told they're underperforming. People know they're underperforming because they've already, complained to everyone else in the organization that it's your fault anyhow. And so look, we know when people are underperforming. Be proactive. Like go ahead and start looking for that position. Start looking for maybe you want to start, well, we don't need a hygienist. Yes, but have 5 of them in the pipeline. Have 5 assistants in the pipeline. Have 5 front desk people in the pipeline. Start thinking through, have doctors in the pipeline. Start, I've got I got to give it to Rachel today, by the way. I've got a name. I'm literally driving in an Uber and I'm talking to this lady. I have an hour Uber drive and she's she is a operations guru, and she had come down from Connecticut, and she was talking about that she had just transferred jobs, so she was riding an Uber, and that she was going to get some education but she was doing amazing entrepreneurial work, I meant operations work, and it was incredible. Like she started telling me the project she was managing, and I was like, holy moly. And she was like, I love project management. I love operations. I love this is my Uber driver, by the way. And I'm like having this conversation. And I said to her, I was like, are you open to opportunity? And she was like, of course. And I was like, give me your name. I was like, give me your name. I was like, I'm going to have someone call you. And we aren't hiring for the position that this person wants right now. Yeah. And it's okay. Like I don't need that's not important. But I'm always looking. I've got my ear to the ground. I'm always trying to find people, and I'm always having conversations with people that I go, this might be somebody at some point who would be great for our organization. Yeah. And we might interview them. I remember, when I was at the investment firm, when we used to interview 76 people for every one we would hire. 76. Now, I want you to stop for a second. Think about 76 interviews. Yeah. 76. I want you to just let that sit with you. If you did one a day, that's basically like a quarter of a year, right? I mean, it's a lot of time to find the right person. Like you would have to build out a recruitment engine to do that. Now, you might not have the capability to do that, and that might be excessive for you. But but when you're doing one interview to one hire, that's telling you that you're probably not in a selection mode. You're probably in recruitment, which is a reactive process, which is like we lost somebody, we got to find somebody. Versus having people in the pipeline that you can make a phone call to, that you get excited about your organization. That Jordan laughs because Jordan's one of our he's most senior advisors, and he laughs because when we met him in March, I think, before this was like we met him in March, and we told him, we'll keep touch with you, and he waited and waited and waited, and 6 months later we came back and hired him, but we didn't hire him when he was ready to go, and And he took another job for a while, and that was his position. And but we kept him in the loop, and he's become one of the greatest tower members we've ever had, and just such an amazing member of the team. But that's a great example. We were recruiting before we even needed the position filled. And
you'll find out that you might come across somebody that's like, okay, so we don't have a need for this, but we do know we have a need for his skill set would be better suited over here. And I was thinking the Jordan situation the whole time, because I was like, okay, so that was we wanted him. We knew we liked him. We knew he passed all the tests that we wanted him to do, but we just didn't have the role for him. We were like, we might have the role in 6 months. If you can if you could figure out, double down in your career right now, and 6 months we'll reopen the conversation. And then he did it. And then we got one of our best team members ever. And I think, with dental practices, if you were to ask, okay, who'd you talk to 6 months ago for recruiting for the hygienist, they wouldn't be able to tell you. They'd be like, I don't really remember. She took that other job. Okay, well, you can still reach out to her and see, hey, how are you doing? We got this opening. I know you wanted it this time. I just wanted to keep open line of communication. You need to have that Rolodex of people ready to go, because then it makes life easier. Then you get into a proactive game. And that's the biggest thing that we're trying to do as an organization, is one of our core values, grow the tower team. So, anything that we do, we're always looking to grow the team, and everyone in the organization knows that. I've had countless people come up to me and say, hey, I have this person or this family member or this friend. What do you think? You guys have a role for them? It's like, I'm always open to a conversation. We might not have the need now, but at least I can explain what tower leadership is. I always like telling people who tower leadership is, what we do, and how we impact so many practices. So I'm happy to have that conversation. And then from there, it's okay. If I was compelling enough, just like what we were with Jordan, of what we were trying to create, they're going to be willing to wait for the opportunity to open up.
It's got to be an investment, it's got to be an investment, and the return's worth it. The return, it's interesting. So I was in a meeting recently with 2 tower team members, and a doctor got this phone call. So we were talking about selling the practice or keeping the practice, and he saw the financial math of keeping this practice, and it was staggering, by the way, the difference between selling and keeping. And in the middle of this, he has another doctor call him up and say, hey, this other doctor, one of the other doctors we have, is thinking about quitting. And I said to the other 2 team members, I said, did you guys just see the energy suck out of the room? And I wanted them to see it. I was like, that's what happens when, I was like, could this doctor do anything about this right this minute? No. Was this helpful? No. I was like, then why did he call him and just dump his stuff on this other doctor? And I was saying, I said to the tower team members in the room, I said, look, I just want to let you know, just so you guys got to see that's the call that doctors don't want. That's the reason they sell their practice, is that damn call. The call that says, hey, your associate's about to quit, or your 2 hygienists just walked out, or whatever it ends up being. That's the call that keeps them up at night. It's the call that makes it people eventually sell their practice prematurely, because it's that call. So if we know it's that call, going back to when we started the podcast of like, I'm doing all of this, like I cut out all the good stuff in life. No, I mean, amazing health because of the things I'm doing now. It's a compound effect, right? It's the reason why I have 0 cloggage in my arteries or whatever is because the fact that I'm proactive. I don't wait until I show up there. And the doctor was telling me at the Mayo Clinic, he was saying, you know when people show up and they're in your position, but they just look like hell and they've let everything deteriorate over time. Well, believe it or not, the hiring process is very similar. The way you wake up with your team, it's like some days we wake up, if we don't do the right things on the front side, we wake up with a clogged artery of a team. We show up and it's not the highest performing team. It's not the people that keep you, not the people that guard you and guard your cup and make sure you're protected and have an amazing hiring process, an amazing training process and operations and everything else. But we've reacted, we've slowly deteriorated our training. We've deteriorated our workforce. We deteriorated our leadership. We deteriorated just little hire by hire by hire by hire. And then one day we wake up and we're like, what in the world happened? Well, it's the same exact process. It's like when we reverse that and we go, look, from this day going on. So this is like your podcast, like
this is your moment.
But this is like I will never hire again without proper testing and evaluation, right? It's like It's like you be your mantra. We do not hire without proper testing and with proper evaluation, right? And it's not just if you like them. Understand, liking has very little correlation to success. You might have somebody you interview, believe it or not, and not like them, and they be the greatest performer ever. And so what happens is we hire people we like that are like our personality. We like people like us. So when you get into your business and your growth, you have to think about the fact of, like, I tell people flat out, like, I think I'm great at communicating Tower's vision and where we're going as a company. But from an interview process, I think I suck. And the reason I say that, okay, let me explain that for a second. The reason why is, like, I'm not the guy who's like, give me 5 strengths and, you know, all that stuff. I'm not the guy who's going to sit there and go like, so tell me in 5 years from now. Like, that's just not my interview style. I don't like that. It's just not we have a very set way of doing things. My job is to come in at the end when the person's gotten through the process and say, let me explain why Tower's the right fit for you. Let me explain the vision. Let me explain where we're going. Like, I'm a visionary. So I want to sit down at the end of the process and have an amazing conversation with this person and get them super excited about joining our team. But I'm not the first interview. I'm not the second interview, and I'm not the third interview. I'm, because I'm not going to be the one who drills down on every little detail in an interview. Yeah. And there's people that are better served at that than I. So, But going down to your process, you have to think about, what is your process? Like, what is your process? What do you have in place? And think about the whole podcast. Like, this might be a good podcast to go back and listen to again and take notes on. And then think about each thing we talked about. I mean, whether it's be your training process, or whatever testing you're doing, or your onboarding process, or, whether it's your hiring process, your selection process, or it's the revenue cycle of a practice and where you might be falling. Like, there's a lot of, in this 36 minutes or so that we've been on here, we've dropped a lot of great nuggets. And I think that this podcast has a lot. I mean, this is a great one. And, this is one of those ones where we talk about liking and sharing, subscribing. Like, send this to a friend. Talk about it together. Talk about the things you guys can do. Get with your team. Sit down, bring out the key points of this podcast and write them down, and then sit down and have a meeting and say, hey, look, let's talk about these items. Because in this podcast, we've probably given you 15 things to do if you really went back and listened to it. And as funny as we are and as likable as we are, right, Matthew? I mean,
man, I would say so.
I mean, there's nuggets in here, and there's great gold, and you got to go grab the gold and then start thinking about your own process and how you can build and grow. Share this with a friend. Talk about it. Sit down together and talk about, hey, let's talk about what you might be doing that's better than I'm doing, or vice versa, or what's our selection process look like, or what's our onboarding process looks like, or what's our training process look like, and start thinking through this. Because if you go back and just grab some portions of this, especially if you've decided to kind of halt expansion for a little bit, now's a great time to dig in to get better. You can get sharper, you can get wiser, you can get better. Like, this is the time to do that. I'd urge you to do it.
You stole my thunder. Like, share, subscribe. I think you guys need to, find somebody. You guys all know somebody that is either struggling with the recruitment aspect or has a lot of turnover in their practice. Sit down, go through it, create processes together. In our operations masterminds, we have COOs and operations directors. Sit down and create a process with other practices. I think it's something underutilized in the dental world, and I would encourage you guys to do it. But as always, like, subscribe, be on the lookout. Next couple of weeks, we're going to have another special guest on. We're going to bring more and more guests on this year. So make sure you tune in each week to see who's coming on. So thank you so much, Mr. Morin, for joining us in the studio, and we'll see you guys next time.